Cassie, I'm your friend, and I want your blood.
I'm kidding. I'm not doing it. You heard me right, folks. I'm not reimagining Ruin because, in my opinion, there's no need to reimagine Ruin. In terms of presentation, Ruin is a complete 180 from its parent game. Instead of loosely connected fetch quests through a wide open world with random enemy encounters, the DLC is a tight, linear adventure through dark, maze-like corridors with enemies largely confined to their own sections or zones. It's almost like someone saw a certain reimagining and got the right idea. The game could have benefited from more linear paths. There could be some bleed over, such as what we saw in Sister Location, allowing for a more focused, streamlined look at their personalities and backstories. The characters are handled with much more deliberation. The daycare attendant's Professor Hulk persona, Eclipse, says a lot about the nature of his split sun-moon personality. The sight of a headless Freddy with a nightmare-esque stomach mouth is 100 times more evocative than anything in Security Breach. And Roxy's arc, plus her connection with Cassie, might be the most solid instance of character development we've seen in, well, any FNAF game.
I love carrot cake. Happy birthday, Cassie.
Roxy, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Make no mistake, there are good things in Ruin, many of which were improvements or fully realized potential from the parents' game. However, almost like a kid who can't shake a bad habit, there are still some issues present in Ruin that feel like holdovers from Security Breach. As good as the character moments are, even fans can't deny they seemed rushed and unrewarding. I'll mostly attribute this to the fact that it's a free DLC with an experience meant to be had in a few hours, but to suggest that they totally make up for the underwhelming character moments in Security Breach would be giving too much credit. The MXES enemy is pretty much a waste. Its first appearances are pretty cool, but soon it becomes relegated to little more than background scenery.
He's just standing there, menacingly!
And many fans are correct that if this super intelligent security AI had the ability to speak, or just convey messages, then the story would have been over in 5 minutes. In regards to technical stuff, you still have funky enemy behaviors.
That's unfortunate.
The puzzles become repetitive, and I'm surprised people don't bring this up more often, but in both Security Breach and Ruin, the subtitling/captioning sucks. Firstly, denoting who's talking is a bad idea when you're trying to keep character identities obscured for tension or storytelling purposes. If you really want to differentiate between characters, do what Outlast 2 did and have the subtitles colored to match. The same goes for outright spoiling things in the subtitles. Secondly, why is it that they just can't fit all the words at one time? Was the word go really so important that it had to appear in a whole separate line? Thirdly, why does this need a subtitle? Or this? Do we really need to know that Cassie is holding her breath? Probably the most insulting example of bad captioning occurs in the main ending, where it appears that two different Gregorys are saying the same voice line, when in reality this was most likely just a bug.
But it's a galaxy-brained reference to how the Mimic is mimicking Gregory.
Oh yeah. The Mimic. Buckle up, game. You've blundered into my territory as someone who's actually reading the books. Now you will know true fear. Hi. So in what I think is the first instance of game lore and book lore intersecting, the Mimic, the overarching antagonist in Tales from the Pizzaplex, is now a confirmed canon presence in the mainline games. You can watch Dako's video for a full breakdown on the Mimic, but what you need to know now is that while Security Breach implied that it was Glitch Trap/Burn Trap messing with the Pizzaplex, Ruin seems to imply that it was actually the Mimic's programming doing so. And while the novel trilogy and the Fazbear Frights seem to exist in some kind of alternate universe, the Tales from the Pizzaplex were long touted to be canonical to the games, and Ruin is the first instance of a FNAF game confirming that. So what's the explanation for this radical revelation? Well, from what I could gather, the new theory is that Glitch Trap from Help Wanted wasn't actually Afton's digitized subconscious, but rather the Mimic, or the Mimic's programming, mimicking Afton, which implies that Vanessa/Vanny was never actually talking to Afton, but rather the Mimic mimicking Afton, and that the Mimic/the Mimic's programming was the one messing with the Pizzaplex and Security Breach, and that Burn Trap never existed, coexisted with the Mimic, was the Mimic? Is the implication that, as far back as 2019 and possibly earlier, Scott Cawthon's plan all along was to introduce this completely new antagonist, the Mimic, hide it in Help Wanted, disguised as Glitch Trap for a red herring, only to formally introduce it in a book series a full 6 months after Security Breach, actually name drop it several months into the book series run, and then bring things full circle in the DLC that released over a year after the first book's release. Either that, or it's a retcon in an attempt to fix perceived story issues with Security Breach, bolstered by a DLC that many saw as restitutional anyway. Guys, come on. Can we be real for a second? This is stupid. This is really stupid. Even if that was the plan all along, and the Mimic's truly been in the works since 2019 and possibly earlier, this is not good storytelling. It's sloppy and shallow, disguised as genius. And what really gets me is how willing the FNAF fanbase is to just accept this. They've embraced the Mimic with open arms and have happily recontextualized Help Wanted and beyond. Like, is the Mimic a cool character? Sure, it's cool. But the way it's been woven into this overarching story feels very inept and undeserved. It doesn't even really make much sense when you dig into it. The only hint that the Mimic is in the original Security Breach is a single asset in a video game within a video game that apparently is supposed to be the baobab tree from The Storyteller. Firstly, looks nothing like a baobab. Secondly, oh look! There's a tree in FNAF 4's menu screen. Does that mean the Mimic's in FNAF 4 as well? And now apparently Security Breach's redemption ending was canonical because it was the only one not represented in comic book pages in Ruin. But are we forgetting that the redemption ending was portrayed through comic book pages in Security Breach, and that the only one that wasn't was the Afton ending? That was not part of the plan, folks. That was a retcon, and you cannot convince me otherwise. Want more proof? Why is it that the bad Vanny ending in the parent game is partially animated and partially comic book pages? The answer is because they probably intended to animate all the endings, but they completed the canon one, they only partially completed the bad Vanny ending, and then ran out of time and resources to animate the rest of the endings, so they resorted to comic book panels, and that Ruin's comic book panel gimmick is just their way of retroactively recasting the original endings. The book situation is also pretty sad because most of these stories are just dedicated to complete, utter nonsense instead of trying to tell an actually fully fledged and compelling narrative about the Mimic and the Pizzaplex. Something like this deserves a novel-length treatment, not an irrelevant epilogue and a few relevant stories scattered among phas fiction about killer nanobot tattoos and abundantly noticeable busts. And based on some of the theories I've seen about the Mimic, it's clear that the majority of fans aren't even reading the books to begin with. And why would they? Reading books is hard. Also, they're just overall not good, so I can't really blame them. And frankly, this whole situation just goes to show how the FNAF fanbase has become completely cuckolded by bad storytelling. Who cares if this character was poorly integrated? Who cares if production issues hindered Steel Wool's ability to tell a competent story? Who cares if they had to enact these last-minute switcheroos to accommodate for these story decisions? Look, it's FNAF! Oh my god, it's Freddy Fazbear! Ah! Guys, I like FNAF. I do. I've been with it since the beginning. There are truly great things about it. But everything I've talked about just proves that they don't respect you. They think that you either won't notice or won't hold them accountable because the brand name FNAF overrules any flaws its entries might have. And it's the exact same mentality that the books have. They're putting out unrefined, improperly thought out products because they know the consumers will just accept them and demand more. And I'm not saying you have to disavow or dislike FNAF now. What I'm saying is we should be able to step back and recognize that this wasn't the result of some grand master plan, but because narrative dead ends and technical shortcomings forced things to play out this way. The implication here, obviously, is that we should hold them accountable. And in a way we did, as I'm sure the backlash to Security Breach motivated a lot of the DLC's direction and presentation. But we shouldn't stop there. Consumers have a right to demand the best work possible from developers. This is not the best work possible. And granted, when I now say hold them accountable, I don't know what that might entail. But I hope that if Steel Wool Studios and Scott Cawthon decide to tackle another game on the scale of Security Breach and Ruin, that they give it the well-roundedness, respect, and time it deserves. Because a fan base as ardent and loyal as this deserves better. But other than that, the game's fine. And that is why I will not be reimagining Security Breach Ruin.